Welcome back to Logic Basics. We're going to be starting a unit on categorical syllogisms. So we're moving now from judgments, where we're talking about categorical statements, all S is P, no S is P, some S is P and some S is not P, to categorical syllogisms, where we'll be taking those statements and making arguments out of them. Remember, an argument uses premises to support a conclusion. An argument is valid if the premises logically support the conclusion, and it's sound if it is valid and the premises are true. So I'm going to be showing you how to construct valid syllogisms using categorical statements. Okay, and we're going to be using a handout that I have for you here called Rules of Validity. You can see this is a well-loved handout. It's been used a lot. So let's first talk about syllogisms and what's involved in a syllogism. So notice here, the categorical syllogism uses categorical statements only as premises and conclusion. So the categorical statements are what I was talking about, A, E, I, and O statements. Maybe we should review those quickly. Let me pull up my iPad here, and I want to review the A, E, I, and O statements for you. A, E, I, O. So we have all S is P, no S is P, some S is P, some S is not P. Another thing we should remember is that each of these we can identify in terms of quantity and quality. Remember that? So A is a universal affirmative, and I will abbreviate that with a UA. And E is a universal negative. We'll call that UN, and I is a particular, spelling, right? Particular affirmative here. We'll call that a PA. And then the last O statement is a particular negative. We'll call that PN. Okay? We're going to need to use these for this whole unit, so it would be good to learn this, commit it to memory. I also want to remind you of the little u's and little p's we talked about at the very beginning of categorical statements. So an A is a UP. Remember that S is universal. It gets it from the A, the all, but this P is particular. Okay, that's going to be really important for our figuring out whether a syllogism is valid. E, remember, was U. No onions are tasty, and no tasty things are onions. I is PP. All dogs are canines, and all canines are dogs. And then O was PU, because O stinks. It tricks us often. All right, so you're going to need to know everything that's on the screen right now for determining whether a syllogism is valid. Particularly, you need to know this stuff, the little u's and little p's. So make a note card, commit it to memory, and that will be how we figure out the validity of an argument. Now I'm going to go back to the handout and tell you something else about syllogisms. All right, so those were the categorical statements. And the syllogism is going to use these statements only A, E, I, and O statements as premises and conclusion. There are two premises and a conclusion to a categorical syllogism. So here's an example. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. We've done this one before, remember? When I talked about an argument. Now, the reasoning here is that by relating two terms, Socrates and mortal, to a third term, man, they could be related to each other. So we're going to have three terms in a syllogism. There are three terms only in a categorical syllogism. The subject term, or the minor term, and it's called the minor term because it's the term that is in the minor premise. This is the subject of the conclusion as well. And there's the predicate term, or the major term, or the P term, which is the predicate of the conclusion. And then there's a middle term, the M term, which is the third term through which the S and P terms are related. The M term cannot be in the conclusion. So let me show you what this looks like. I'm going to go back to my iPad, and I'm going to show you with the all men are mortal example. So here's a major premise. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. And the conclusion is Socrates is mortal. All right. Now, what we have are three terms I'm going to show you. Here in our conclusion is the S term. This is the subject of the conclusion. This is our P term. It's the predicate of the conclusion. But these terms are also inside the argument itself. So we can follow the P term to the major premise. Here, let's call this the major premise. And this is the minor premise. And this is the conclusion. All right, so we're starting with the S and the P in the conclusion, and you follow the P term to the major premise. It's the major term. And the minor term is in the minor premise, and we'll call that S. So the subject term is in the minor, the predicate term is in the major, and then they're related by this middle term. This middle term we'll call M. This is the middle term. Okay, so there are three terms in a categorical syllogism. The S term, which is the subject of the conclusion, the P term, which is the predicate of the conclusion, and the M term, which relates the S and P term together. We also have, in a previous series, we learned how to identify subject, copula, predicate, and quantifier. So we also have that as part of our background. We'll call that one of the building blocks. So here, let's just look at this statement. All men are mortal. We know how to diagram this, sort of. We have our subject term and our predicate term and our copula and our quantifier, and we know that this is an A statement because it has all is. So it's it's a universal affirmative. It's an A statement, right? Sometimes this quantifier is not explicit. So in the case of Socrates, remember we talked about this before, there's only one member of the class, Socrates. So all Socrateses are a man. There's only one member, so that's a universal. So what we have here is an A statement, an A statement, and an A statement. That's called the mood of an argument. Okay, the mood is the types of categorical statements that we're looking at as premises and conclusions. The way the middle term is put together is called the figure of the argument. So here, the way this is a diagonal here, this is going to be our figure, and this is going to be called our mood. So there are two things we have to learn, and I think I'll split those videos up. First mood, then figure. But let's return to the handout before we move on to new things. I wanted to just go over this part. The rules governing this form of reasoning are simple. Two terms identical with a third are identical with each other, and two terms of which only one is identical with a third are not identical with each other. Also, what is true of all, the universal, is true of each, the particulars. And what is denied of all, the universal, is denied of each, the particulars. Okay, so we are going to commit this to memory that we have categorical statements, A, E, I, and O, that make up categorical syllogisms, premise, conclusion. Within this categorical syllogism, we have an S term, the subject term, which is the the minor premise term. We have the P term, which is the major premise term, and we have the M term, the middle term, that relates them both. Now, these rules we're going to look at are going to tell us how to make a syllogism and test it for validity. So we're going to do that next, and I'm going to show you how to split these rules into manageable pieces. All right, so I will pause here. Next time we talk about mood. Get in the mood. It's going to be great.